Welcome to the Hockey Writers Prospect Corner, a show with our top prospects writing crew, bringing you the latest news, analysis, scouting reports, mocks, rankings, and much more. From the World Juniors to the NHL Draft floor, from the farm to the NHL, our team covers everything that happens in the world of prospects. So sit back, grab a notebook, and get ready for Prospect Corner.
Welcome back into another Prospect Corner here at the Hockey Writers. If you just watched our Scouting Combine episode, thanks for watching that. Thanks, Peter, for joining, and talking about that, about your live coverage there. But we're going to be talking on this time. We're going to go and keep going on our draft targets series here and add another two teams that are up high in the draft: Montreal Canadiens, New Jersey Devils. And we'll keep going through the teams. I know we had a comment on our last video about talking about smaller market teams. Not sure New Jersey's a small market team, but they're not as talked about as some of the other bigger teams. But we will be getting into that, so don't worry. We're going to try to get through most of the first, at least the lottery pick teams before the draft, to kind of give you a sense of what type of guys they could be targeting. We're probably not going to be right, but it's great to speculate. So again, joined in by Peter Baracchini, Devin Little. Let's get into this. We love doing projections and targets. So let's start with the first round and start with the Montreal Canadiens, but we're not going to talk too much about the guy they're going to probably pick first overall. It's probably going to be Shane Wright, but it is worth talking about here that New Jersey is inviting Shane Wright to come to New Jersey and talk to them. Full out welcoming party. And why are they doing this? Because they're probably not going to pick him. So do you think, Peter, quickly, do you think this is a big thing, or is it, again, like we talked about in the last video, due diligence? Who knows? Maybe Montreal picks Slafkovsky. Maybe they pick Logan Cooley. You never know. So Wright could be there. Peter, do you think there's anything to this? Does Wright not go first overall and New Jersey get him?
I mean, I still have Wright first overall. I think a lot of people still have Wright first overall. I think it's just due diligence just in case he does fall. And I'd be really, really, really shocked if he drops. I mean, Cooley still has maybe closing the gap on the top center mark. But I don't know. I go back to Wright's IQ and awareness and his situational awareness. I think it's hard to find a player who knows that already. And Slafkovsky has that, but again, I think the tiebreaker goes to the center. You build teams around centermen. He may not be as, dynamic as McDavid or Matthews, but he's going to be successful in his own regard. I mean, there's no other way around it. He's going to be a top two-way player at some point because of his smarts alone. If New Jersey's just doing this, I think maybe, again, in case he does fall, I just can't see it happening. I still think that maybe they take Slafkovsky. Because if I'm building a team, as much as you love Slafkovsky's power, again, centerman, it's tough to find centerman, especially as smart as Wright.
Yeah. Devin, have anything to add to that? I mean, is it due diligence, or is it there's something to this that they think Wright's going to fall to them?
It's due diligence because, you without straight on asking the other team, hey, you're going to pick this guy. You can't know for sure, who's going to go first overall, especially in a year like this where there are questions, right? If it's not the Connor McDavid draft where, it'd be crazy if they would have picked Jack Eichel first overall. Yeah. So, there is that room for speculation and, wondering whether or not they will go first overall. And in that situation, if he is there at second, you want to know who you're going to get. But like Peter, I would be shocked if it's not right first overall. So I think it's just doing your due diligence.
So I guess we can all agree that Montreal is going to pick Shane Wright and New Jersey is going to pick Slafkovsky. So we don't really need to talk about the first round picks, both of them at the top, unless you guys have something else. I think those are the top two. We've talked about this on a few shows already. So let's move to New Jersey. Doesn't have any other first round picks, but Montreal does have another one towards the end of the draft. So let's throw out some targets that you think they could potentially go for. They got Shane. So we'll assume they have Shane Wright as the centerman that they pick in this first round. Who do they go in their second first round pick in this draft? We'll start with you, Devin.
Well, after getting their franchise centerman, I would like to see them maybe target a future cornerstone on their defense. Now, obviously, Montreal's in a position where best player available is the right way to go. But if they get to kind of pick and choose on, position, I'd like to see them pick a defenseman. And, Shea Weber obviously is done at this point. They don't have that guy on their blue line anymore. And they do have some guys coming up, but I'd like to see them maybe target a right-handed guy and maybe a guy like Seamus Casey could fit for them, maybe. Other guys that could fit would be Liam Bushell. I could see that being a fit for them, even like Ryan Chesley. But like I said, I think they've got good forward prospects and good young forwards on their team already. Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield. It's on the defense where they don't have necessarily as much high end prospects. So I think with that second first round pick, I would be looking to maybe grab the best defenseman available.
Peter, you have anyone else you're kind of looking at for the Montreal Canadiens in the last part of the first round? They got Calgary Flames pick, so that is towards the end there.
No, I think Devin nailed it on the head. I mean, they got Alexander Romanov already in the system, but I believe he's a left-handed shot. If my computer is loaded. Yeah, he's a left-handed shot. Caden Gooley's a left-handed shot.
Yep.
You got to go for a right-handed D-man. And when I talked to Ryan Chesley, he described himself as a mix of Ryan McDonough, Charlie McAvoy, and Jacob Slavin. So you see a sense of where he is with all three of those players. And the fact that the Canadiens drafted Ryan McDonough, then traded him to New York, why not get a Ryan McDonough type defenseman back in your system? Because he is physical. He has great speed, mobility, situational awareness on the defensive side. I've been a big fan of his all season long. Yeah, the offensive production isn't there, but when he jumps into the rush or when he picks the spots to jump in, he can make you hurt. And I honestly think that he would probably be the best fit. He's got size, and he could be a cornerstone for them on the future in the back for the future. I can't even speak right now. For the future on the back end. There we go, Peter.
Yeah. Oh, I'm on the same wavelength. I think they should definitely look at defensemen. I mean, obviously they're not going to pick Nemitz or Jiricek first overall, so they won't get those guys. But they got that Seamus Casey down there. Ty Nelson is another guy that could potentially be in that range. They could also get him with their second round pick, depending on if he falls that far. We'll talk about that next. But yeah, I think defenseman is definitely where they go because they do need that in their system along with that centerman. But they do got Shane Wright now. So if that all goes according to what we think.
And our Habs writer Blaine took Chesley in our first round mock, and I absolutely love that pick as well. So
yeah, I could definitely see him going at that range. So we'll see if that actually happens. So that's for second round picks, but there's some targets down there. We'll start with Montreal. It was Montreal that I was talking about. Yes. I was flipping between two screens, but yeah. So Peter, we'll start with you. Second round picks that they could potentially target that could fit their system.
Yeah. Again, this is where we get to those like fringe first, second round picks. I'm Noah Ostlund could be an option. Obviously, he is a centerman. Maybe that is out of the question, but I do like his pace. He can play wing, but he's better suited as a centerman. So you maybe want to try and go for a wing prospect. Yanni Nyman has, really great shot, great size as well. Alexandre Kaskamaki looked great for Finland at the U18s. Julian Lutz is another intriguing option. He was supposed to be a late first, early second, but injuries derailed him this season. And as I talked about, he was one of the top, or mostly in the top 25 for some of the testing. So it shows his strength. He's got a wicked shot, great speed. And like I said, he described himself as a Jaguar. So he has that ability, the speed, the tenacity. I think you try to look at that and maybe try and get a gauge of who's the best fit. But if you want to try and get a little bit bigger with by still having that speed, I think Lutz could be an option.
Mm-hmm. No, those are great picks too. Devin, you have anyone to add to targets that Montreal could look at the second round here?
Well, if they don't get the defenseman with that second first round pick, because maybe a forward drops that they have to grab. Mm-hmm. That this would be the time to then go get that defenseman. Maybe even if they're not a righty, maybe a guy like Lane Hudson could make sense for them. That would be fun to watch, let me tell you. I could also see, they could also, especially, early on in the second, this is where you can start taking some swings. If he's still on the board, Ivan Miroshnichenko could be a good pick.
Yes.
If he's on the board. And then also center. So they don't need to do this, especially if they're getting Shane Wright. But I can see Nathan Goucher being a good fit for them too. Yes. I can imagine having the center depth of Wright, Suzuki, and Goucher. That'd be pretty good. So I think overall here, depending on what they do with that second first round pick, they can kind of just have their pick of the litter with that second round pick. It's just kind of, if they've addressed their biggest needs, so to speak, with those first two picks, and then they can just go straight best player available, and they should have plenty of candidates for that title.
Another name is probably Rieger Lawrence too. I think he could catch their eye.
Yeah. And the thing is, that first round pick is close to their second round pick. So potentially that second rounder could, in all purposes, it could be a first round pick. Because it's so close. So guys like that could, Christian Kyrou is another guy that could be around that area, which from previous episodes, who I really like, and I think he could fit in Montreal, and especially under San Luis system, because now that he's head coach for the foreseeable future here, his system's gonna be high pressure, high offense, and defensemen like you say, Lane Hudson, Kyrou, guys like that are gonna really thrive in that system. So same thing with forwards, right? So
if there's a highly ranked player still on the board that can speak French, you can imagine that they'll be pretty high on that kid.
Well, and Miroshnichenko's an interesting one now that he's been cleared to skate, right? So that's going to be a big thing moving forward here. He may actually go higher in the first round now. He was supposed to be a top 10 pick not that long ago. So that may throw a wrench into different things in that top 15, because if he's picked, then other guys drop, and then you've got some interesting things happening. All right, let's move to the Devils side on the second round here. They have, I believe they were the ones that had 3 second round picks. I'm going to pull up my thing here. No, they don't. They only have one. They have 3 fourth rounders. So we'll move forward to that. Fact check myself. So they only have 1 second round pick. Who do they target? We'll say for all intents and purposes, they picked Slafkovsky second overall. Who do they target in the second round? Moving forward here, we'll start with you, Devin, on this one. Who do they target second round here?
Well, similar to what I said about the Canadiens with their second first rounder, I think this is where New Jersey would probably like to get a high end defender. Because, they've got Luke Hughes coming up. They got Dougie Hamilton already in place. A couple other guys that can, potentially be some NHL defensemen. But if there's a potential steal on the board there, especially on the blue line, I think this is where New Jersey would jump all over it. Because they've got the franchise centerman. They've got, if they add Slafkovsky, they're going to have a franchise winger, center, whatever you want them to be. They got the franchise defenseman and Luke Hughes. And there's not like a goalie in this range that could, scream, "Oh, I'm a franchise goaltender." So I would be targeting defensemen. And I think, some of the names I mentioned with Montreal could be applicable here. Another player I'd throw out just because, would probably be available in this range would be Matthias Havelid. I could see him being a pick there. I would look for a skilled, shifty defenseman in this range for New Jersey. Doesn't have to be have a lead, but I would look for someone who can move the needle for them on the blue line.
Yeah, those are great thing. I mean, again, they need goaltending is the biggest thing, but again, they're not going to pick a guy down here that's a goaltender because there's no high end guys, second round pick type guys here. Peter, you have anyone to add to that for New Jersey for the second round here?
Yeah, I see them taking a defender. Thomas Hamara is one name on the European side, but also on the North American side, I really grown to like Michael Bushinger from the Guelph Storm. Really solid skater. I mean, more of a playmaker, but does find the seams and the open spots to sneak in and try and get himself open. Plays with pace, and that's the main important thing. He's got the speed, he's got the agility to be a factor on the back end. Really great defensively. Left, I'm not sure if the shot cut or the handedness comes into effect, but he's a left-handed shot, but still a great player with some upside to his game. And he had 44 points in 63 games this season with the Storm. So that was really impressive to see. They still want to go forward. I mean, you still got Reed Schaefer, really big left winger out of Seattle. Again, the same names as before, Kaskamaki, Yanni Nyman, Philip Mezar. If he drops low, I don't see that happening. Yeah. But I think he should be either late first, early second. But yeah, I think those are the names you got to look out for.
Reed Schaefer's been really good in the playoffs for Seattle. My gosh. So he's, I think, raising his stock for a lot of teams. So I could definitely see him going in that early second round range now. I didn't have him that high on my last rankings, but he is raising up, especially after his performance in the playoffs. So Schaefer's definitely a guy I would look at as well. Danny Zilkin, another guy, I think could be a New Jersey type pick. Even though they do have a plethora of centermen. I mean, you could always need more centermen. You can always use them. I mean, you could trade them away if you don't for something you need. So that's another guy. Yeah, defenseman, like any of those names are definitely big ones for me as well. So New Jersey has some options with that second round pick because they're, again, by all intents and purposes, it is a first round pick because it is the second pick in that second round. So, we'll see. Now let's move into the potential gems, later round picks that could potentially work for these two teams, which, like I mentioned before, they have 3 fourth round picks. New Jersey does. I have their own Edmonton's and New York Islanders. So the Edmonton's one will be a little lower. If it wasn't a pick for something else, I'd have to look deeper into that. But they have 3 fourth round picks. Montreal. We'll start with New Jersey on this one, since we've started with Montreal each time. What fourth round picks could they potentially, and later? I mean, they have a 5th round as well. Peter, who do you kind of target? I mean, this is where crapshoot kind of you throw darts and see if you can find one. But do you have anyone that could potentially fit New Jersey?
Let me get up my rankings because I got my final ones coming out soon, and I got a little bit more. Instead of just going by the numbers, I honestly think if they're looking for a 4th rounder, I don't know exactly where they're picking at the moment just yet. Let me scroll through cap friendly. Wait, can't. Forget it. If we're looking at a 4th round for New Jersey, especially if they're picking in that top 105, I'm going to pick with that one because that's the easiest one and the closest one to find.
Yeah.
I currently have a player like Josh Philman, Servak Petrovsky. I think he was very underrated this year. Alec Bump from Minnesota High, Prior Lake. He's a name that's really flown under the radar. I think he could do some damage there. Angus Booth, if they're looking for a defenseman, and one name that really stood out for me this year as well is George Fagaris from the OJHL North York Rangers. I talk about players flying under the radar because he's not an OHL, not a USHL, not a collegiate type of player, but he was very effective this season. I believe he was named top OJHL player, if I'm not mistaken. I'll circle back to that once I fact check that, but he's got great mobility, great 2-way game. I think if they want a possible late round gem, I think he's one you got to keep a name on for the New Jersey Devils.
Yeah, those are great picks. There's actually quite a few interesting names in that later round range that you never know. That could potentially do something. So, Devin, you have anyone to add to that list that New Jersey could be targeting in that range, the 3rd to 7th round area?
Well, I'm going to start by, start with a preemptive strike here, because I can already sense that there will be a fan, at least one fan out there that is super high on Nico Dawes and will say, oh, the Devils don't need a goalie. They've got the goalie of the future, blah, blah, blah. Even got Blackwood, he'll bounce back. I will tell you right now, you don't have a goalie until you have a goalie. The Red Wings have Sebastian Cossa in their system, and I'm not ready to say they have their goalie until he proves he's the goalie. So with that in mind, I think this is maybe where New Jersey takes a goalie. Maybe this is kind of where you start to feel comfortable about the goaltending crop in this this year's class. So, if he's on the board, maybe this is where they take a guy like Hugo Havelid. Maybe they take Tyler Brennan. Any of those top goalies, if there's, maybe one of them's already gone, maybe two of them's already gone by this point of the draft, but anyone who's basically at the top of the list for goalies, I would say this is where the Devils maybe take their shot at one, because like I said, until you have your goalie, you should be still looking to add goalies and hoping that one of them turns into your franchise goalie. So for a team like New Jersey, who still has questions, this is where I would start to look to get that goalie out of this class.
Talking about goaltenders, I would look at an overage guy, Thomas Milic. He's, again, I talked about Seattle with Schaefer, and he's been amazing for the Seattle Thunderbirds. And they're in the WHL final now. And his goals against average is insane. So, I mean, he's been really impressive. Wasn't drafted last year. Really surprising to me because he was really good in the under 18s and kind of got on the map for me. I know I had him, later round guy. This is where I think he does get drafted. And New Jersey, like you said, with goaltenders, could potentially be a guy that they may go for, especially if some of those other guys, like you said, are off the board. Because Milic is a guy I think is going to go higher than a lot of people think at this point, because he's an overager. I mean, sometimes overagers, they get the 7th round or even out of the draft. But you look at guys like Chinnikov, overager, but was the 1st round pick. So hey, you never know where these guys can go. I'm not saying Milic is going to go that high, but I could see definitely New Jersey picking him. All right, let's go to the Montreal Canadiens side. They're the ones with multiple 2nd round picks. So let's look at a few that they could potentially pick. Not 2nd round. My gosh, this is a Sunday. It's different days here. They have multiple late round picks. They got 6. They got 3 in the 3rd round, 3 in the 4th round, and then 2 in the 7th, along with their 5th and 6th. So they got tons of darts that they're going to throw in this last part of the draft. So, Devin, you have anyone that they could pick? I mean, they got a lot. They got a few guys that they could. They would be adding quite a few in these later rounds.
Yeah, I mean, there's you could probably name off 10 guys, and they're all viable targets, right? Just because sheer amount of picks. I got 2 guys I'll throw out, and you can pick wherever they might land. One would be defenseman Otto Salin out of Finland. Kind of a I think he has 2-way potential. Could definitely push the pace offensively, and can refine his defensive game. Right-handed guy. Talked about their need to add a guy on the right side of the blue line. I would think he's a few. We'll need time to develop, basically. But they have time. It's not like they're pressing for players to come in and assume. And I think Salin, the thing about Finns is that I actually like how Finnish players develop. I think that they play in a league that is, it's competitive. There's men who play in it, but it's not the same level of competition as, say, the KHL or even the AHL to a certain extent. It's like racing with training wheels, sort of. So then when you go to like the AHL, I feel like it's almost like a smoother transition. It's you've dipped your toe in that water. So I think for a Finnish defenseman like Salen, I think he could develop into something nice there, especially with, coming out of a later round. And then another player that I think could fit just as, project pick, maybe turns into something nifty, maybe a middle six forward, would be Adam Sikora. And let me tell you, as someone who always thought Peter Sikora had a really cool name, I'm excited to see Adam Sikora potentially be a NHLer. And that's just another guy out of Slovakia who will need time to refine his game, develop NHL skills, develop, an NHL game. But I think could, like I said, could become a nifty little depth scorer if developed right. And when you're getting players in this range, you're more often than not, like way more often than not, getting players that will need time and, could or may not develop into something special. So this is where, like you said, Matt, from the onset, this is where you throw darts. This is where you hope that you hit something. So even if you end up with a player who in Salen could end just being a third line defenseman who can be responsible for his own end, and Sikora, who is a depth producer down the lineup on the wing, you take those picks, even if they're not, top line players.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, you never know what can happen. Like you said with the Finnish thing, that they are in a great system. Their development system is probably one of the best. And that's why you see a lot of these guys make it, even if they're not high end guys, they end up being third, fourth liners that could just, be those workman like guys, and defensemen, the same thing. So it's never actually a bad thing to go and draft a Finn, because you never know what'll happen. Peter, you have anyone to add to that later round picks that Montreal Canadiens could potentially get?
Yeah. I'm always big on Chase Weir from the Red Deer Rebels. Not the best offensive player, but, still very smart with his positioning, more defensive defenseman kind of thing. But if they want to go a little more of the offensive route, Spencer Silva could be a puck mover that has a really great, transitional game, great speed, skating, passing, but he's a left-hand shot. Do they go with that again? Just go best player available, I think. Fagares is another name that I mentioned for the Devils. I'll say him again for the Montreal Canadiens, and perfect segue because he was the top prospect for the OJHL this year. So to clarify that as well. If they want a little bit more offense, both Silva and Fagares as maybe third round picks. You want to go a little bit more defensive. I really like the composure that Jace Weir has in his own end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are great ones. I want to throw out Jorian Donovan as another guy. I did his profile not that long ago, and really like his work ethic and his speed on defense. Again, left-hand shot, but he could definitely be a guy that I believe he's left-hand from what I remember. So again, fact check myself.
It's so fun we're doing a live show like this.
He's a defenseman.
Yep. Of that, you can be sure.
He's a defenseman, but he's definitely got great mobility and again the work ethic, and I could definitely see him being a guy. Again, if you want to go down the route of being, Jordan Dumas is another guy.
Yep.
There's so many guys you could throw out here. Antoine Viro out here that Montreal could potentially be looking at, and they could all could potentially be NHLers down the road. So we'll see what Montreal does here, and because they got a lot of picks, so they're going to be quite a few picked here. We'll see if we're right on any of them when we look back at this episode after the draft, which we will do when we start doing the recaps. We'll see if we got anyone right. That's gonna be fun. All right, let's get to our prospects of the week, as we usually do on the show. Devin, we'll start with you. Who's your prospect of the week?
Well, we talk about Wyatt Johnston all the damn time on the show, right? So figured we talk about another Dallas Star, but not that one. Let's talk about the other awesome center that they have coming up. That, of course, is Maverick Bourque. I've seen a comment or two on the show about don't forget Maverick Bourque. We have not. It's kind of hard to forget about Maverick Bourque. He's had himself quite the season with Shawinigan this year. 68 points in 31 games. That's really
geez.
good.
That's okay.
Not bad. And then in the playoffs, which Shawinigan is in the final in the queue, he's got 19 points in 12 games. So he's following up a dominant regular season with a pretty darn good playoffs. As you may or may not know, he was drafted 30th overall in that 2020 draft. Not bad at all for a team that went to the Stanley Cup final that year to get a guy like Maverick Bourque in the first round. That's rich getting richer. And then they got Johnston the next year. So shout out to the Dallas Stars. I guess overall what I'm getting at here with Maverick Bourque is that, if you watch the show with any regularity, you know by now that Wyatt Johnston is a name to look out for. And he's probably, going to challenge hard for a NHL spot next year. But don't forget about Maverick Bourque. If Johnston is maybe their top line center of the future, Bourque's going to be right behind him there on that second line. And that is going to be dangerous, especially when you factor in all the wingers they have coming up too, with Stankoven, and they have Robertson already. And they've got some guys who aren't exactly old yet. So we keep saying it, but I'm going to say it once again. Look out for the Dallas Stars because they're not done yet.
Yes. Well, the thing is, we mentioned already Stankoven and Johnston. Maverick Bourque's in there too. So there's a dynamic trio right there, along with all the other guys they already have. Peter, let's go to your prospect of the week. This is the guy we've mentioned already, but let's mention him again.
Yeah. Marco Kasper, a bit of the combine thing. He really stood out in terms of his, testing his endurance ability, agility, everything like that. And also his presence in the interviews, post combine and skill testing. He was a really great kid. I really think teams are really going to like him. Has the strength, and even on the ice, he has the intensity, the drive, the power, what you want in the centerman. And I'm also just going to give a little friendly honorable mention to Reed Schaefer of the WHL. 1 assist in their first game against the Oil Kings, where they won 2-1. And overall, in terms of stats for players in the WHL, he is ranked. Again, my computer is being a little bit slow right now. He's ranked in the top 15 in playoff scoring right now. So again, we've talked about Seattle Thunderbirds and Thomas Milic previously before. Reed Schaefer doing his part to try and improve his draft stock right now.
Yeah. And another thing I want to point out too is, if everyone didn't know this, but there were guys that invited to that scouting combine that didn't attend because they were playing in the playoffs. So some of these guys never did fitness testing or any of those interviews. So, the Seattle Thunderbirds, Edmonton Oil Kings. Okay, I'm off the top of my head, all the guys, but all the teams that are still in the playoffs.
You could rest assured I would have talked to Schaefer and or Kevin Kurchinski.
Yeah. But they were not there. So, so any of the teams that are still into the OHL, WHL, and QMJHL playoffs, were not at that combine. So if you didn't see their names, why weren't they here? Well, because that's why. So I'm going to go to my prospect of the week, who was there, Marek Hayduk. He was actually interviewed. It was on the New Jersey Devils website. They posted his interview, and I did his prospect profile the day before. I believe it actually was released the day of the combine for the fitness testing and all that. But I really like this guy. He's the son of Milan Hayduk. Not, of course, the high-end scoring skill that his dad had. But what's interesting is Milan was actually drafted in the 4th round. So he was not a high-end draft pick when he was drafted by the Quebec Nordiques way back when. But, I mean, his son has some really good skill, great speed, great explosive. He's an explosive skater. Work ethic off the charts, probably one of those all-around utility players. May not drive a line, but he'll definitely contribute. And as you can see in the playoffs, guys like that are very valuable. Guys like that have speed, that can kill penalties, that can add that energy to your lineup is massive. And of course, being the son of an NHL player, he grew up around a guy that, and he was in dressing rooms, and yes, he was really young. He says he still remembers his dad's 1,000th game. So in the NHL, even though he was young, but he gets he gets all that advice from a guy that's been around the block a few times. So 50 goal scorer in the NHL, as everyone knows that Milan Hajduk was. They were talking about it's funny, it's that Detroit Red Wings, if they would pick him, that his dad would have to just get used to it because of the rivalry that the Red Wings and the Avalanche had when he was playing. So that was a fun little tidbit.
Alex Tanguay is an assistant coach for the Red Wings. So at least there's a familiar face behind there for him. If that were to happen.
If that were to happen. Yeah. So let's shout out his name because he's rated to be going maybe in the later rounds, 4th, 5th round. Some outlets don't even have him on the board. So, but I think he'll get drafted in the later rounds. He's got that, again, teams look for this because in the playoffs, you need guys like that in your lineup because they make a difference. So we'll see what happens where he goes, but he's a guy that stood out for me after I did his profile. So there you go. There's another Prospect Corner, two-parter. Thanks for watching both parts. If you did, watch both videos here. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Devin, for coming on the show again. We'll be back next week with another set of targets. And if anything else happens, that's fun in the prospect world, we'll be talking about that as well. So thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.